Most people who get romance scammed aren't lonely. They have friends, careers, full lives. They get targeted because they're emotionally available, which is different. And by the time many of them realize what's happening, they're no longer evaluating a stranger. They're protecting someone they believe they know. Today, we're examining 5 specific signs that what looks like a relationship may actually be a managed fraud operation, not through fear, through the mechanics. Because understanding how these operations are structured is what makes the warning signs visible before the financial damage begins. The first sign often feels like a positive. The person is always there. They respond quickly. They remember details. They check in throughout the day. Good morning messages, good night messages, questions about your week, your health, the conversation you had 2 days ago. At first, this looks like attentiveness. But many fraud operations run in shifts. Different individuals may manage the same victim account around the clock, creating the illusion of a single attentive person who never seems busy, distracted, or unavailable. Real people have schedules, meetings, bad days. They go quiet sometimes. Scam personas often don't, because maintaining contact is part of the operation. If someone you've never met in person appears available almost every hour of every day, that consistency itself may be the mechanism you're not seeing. The second sign is speed. Within days, phrases like these start appearing. I've never felt this kind of connection before. You understand me better than anyone I've ever met. I feel like I've known you my whole life. Within weeks, the conversation begins moving toward long-term plans, living together, a future, permanence. This is not romance accelerating naturally. This is emotional commitment being manufactured on a timeline. Because once someone is invested in a future, questioning the relationship starts to feel like losing it. They aren't selling an experience. They're selling a future. And futures are much harder to walk away from than strangers. The third sign is avoidance. Not obvious avoidance. Strategic avoidance. They agree to meet, just not now. There's always a reason. A work contract overseas, a deployment, travel restrictions, a family crisis, technical problems on their end preventing a video call. Each excuse on its own sounds plausible. The pattern only becomes visible when you step back and count the weeks. Weeks become months. Months becomes longer still. And the relationship remains entirely digital. A genuine relationship generally moves towards verification. A scam relationship moves towards delay. Because the moment a claimed identity is independently confirmed, the operation becomes much harder to maintain. The fourth sign is a backstory that answers too much. Many romance scams rely on highly adaptable cover narratives. The specific details vary, but the structure is remarkably consistent. The person works overseas, or in a restricted profession, or somewhere difficult to access. Their circumstances explain why communication is limited, why meetings keep falling through, why normal verification is impossible, why certain requests, when they eventually come, should be accepted without question. The backstory isn't just context. It functions as a pre-built objection handler. Every concern the victim might raise has already been accounted for in the narrative. The story doesn't just explain reality, it controls reality. The fifth sign appears well before any financial request, and that's precisely why most people miss it. Money starts entering the conversation as context. Financial difficulty mentioned in passing, an unexpected expense that complicated things. Problems accessing funds from overseas, an account issue that's being sorted. No ask, just information. What actually happening is preparation. The scammer is conditioning the emotional environment. They are gauging your reaction to financial hardship, identifying whether empathy is available. And they are establishing a pattern so that when a request eventually comes, it doesn't feel like a request from a stranger. It feels like helping someone you care about through a problem you have already been introduced to. The setup comes first, the ask comes later. Then comes the turning point. A medical crisis, the legal problem, a travel emergency, a frozen account, and an unexpected fee preventing them from getting home. The exact scenario changes, the structure doesn't. There is a problem. You are uniquely positioned to help, and time is running out. Victims often describe this moment as feeling different from everything before it. The conversation becomes urgent, focused, compressed. The emotional stakes feel suddenly very high. That shift is not incidental. Urgency is not a side effect of the crisis. Urgency is the mechanism. Under normal circumstances, people pause before sending money to someone they've never met. They ask questions. They verify. They talk to someone else first. Urgency is specifically designed to compress that window. When strong emotion is activated, the brain moves towards solving the immediate problem. Verification becomes secondary. Caution starts to feel like a failure of empathy. Scammers don't need victims to stop thinking entirely. They only need them to postpone verification long enough to send money. Just this once. Just to help. Just until the situation is resolved. But the situation rarely resolves. One emergency transitions into another. One payment becomes the foundation for the next request. Each framed as the final obstacle, until a new one appears. Notice what happens to the payment method. Victims often expect normal financial channels. Bank transfers through verified services, traceable documentation. Instead, get directed toward methods that are difficult or impossible to reverse. Wire transfers, cryptocurrency, gift cards, peer-to-peer payment apps, transfers routed through third-party accounts. These channels aren't chosen for convenience. They're chosen because they reduce the possibility of recovery. Meanwhile, the identity behind the relationship may be entirely fabricated. Photographs taken from real people's accounts, videos repurposed from public social media, names changed between operations. The same scripted persona may be running simultaneously across dozens of victims in different countries. What felt like the unique connection was, in many cases, a standardized fraud script being executed at volume by people who will never meet their victims in locations that are difficult to trace. Step back and look at this structure. Every interaction is filtered through the scammer. Every photograph, every message, every explanation, every delay. You only ever receive what they choose to provide. In a real relationship, reality gradually corrects assumptions. You see the person in ordinary moments. You observe how they handle the mundane. In a fraud operation, assumptions are protected. Ordinary moments never arrive. Which leads to a useful diagnostic question. What evidence exists that is independent of what this person has told you? Not evidence they provided. Independent evidence. In many of these cases, the answer is very little. And any barrier preventing that independent verification, however reasonable the explanation sounds, is a material part of the risk assessment. Perhaps the hardest realization for victims is this. The emotions were real. The attachment was real. The conversations felt real. But the identity may have been. You weren't in a relationship. You were inside a script, carefully designed to build trust. Because trust is what makes the financial request feel justified. The money is not the first thing they take. Trust is. Money follows. If any part of this is familiar, that discomfort is worth examining. Doubt is not proof, but doubt is information. Before sending money, before making another exception, talk to someone outside the relationship, someone with no stake in the answer. Fraud becomes significantly harder to maintain when a second set of eyes examine the story. If this helps someone recognize the warning signs earlier, share it. Awareness is often the first interruption in a scammer's plan.